Well, good afternoon. Good afternoon and welcome to another of our webinar Wednesdays produced by the California State University Bakersfield, SBDC, here in Bakersfield, California. We're here now for number 39 consecutive weeks on a Wednesday, providing you the latest up-to-date information, the latest training information, anything you want to find out about pandemic relief services, we're going to talk about them. So like we have for many weeks, we'll be talking about a variety of different factors. And get my screen working here again. So what we'll do is we'll cover a variety of different factors for you today. Again, number 39, hard to believe, isn't it? 3/4 of a year of doing these. So we're part of the America's SBDC, the Small Business Development Center program, which is in all 50 states, 6 foreign territories, U.S. occupied territories, and others. Here in California, as you know, we have 6 regions. We're part of the Central California region, best part of California in many of our opinions. Central California going from the top of Mono County down here to Kern, the Pacific Ocean, the state of Nevada, and everything in between, 14 great counties, including the Central Coast, the San Joaquin Valley, and of course the Eastern Sierra, along with the High Mojave Desert. So here we are, December 9th, 16 days till Christmas. Hard to believe, isn't it? So today we're going to talk about a lot of the different things impacting your small businesses having to do with the pandemic. And we're going to look at a lot of what's going on with some of the testing as the COVID-19 continues to be a major thorn and continue to be a problem. We'll look at a lot of the cases, reopening. We're going to talk a little bit today about stimulus, very little about the state grant programs that we introduced last week, but we'll mention those, a couple of those. We're going to have a little item called PPP forgiveness, 10 things to remember. And we'll go through kind of what I think are 10 important things conceptually to remember. I've received a lot of questions from you and a lot of comments about the PPP forgiveness. When we have about, last time I checked, about 30% of our businesses that have replied to our poll have gone through that process, but there are still many more out there and still many more questions that still need to be answered. And if we don't get that done today, what we'll do is we're going to come back with a full hour-long special version of PPP forgiveness. PPP forgiveness is something that we had talked about for several weeks in a row. And then all of a sudden, the well went dry and information became harder to find. And when that happened, what we did was we talked about other things as other things became available. So having followed the PPP program since week number 2, and then including week number 2 back in, well, it was about 10 days before it was even enacted through the CARES Act on April the 3rd, and then all the different changes and variations. Of course, June 5th is a memorable date with the PPP Flexibility Act, and a lot of other things. So there's a lot going on still with PPP forgiveness, and we're going to talk about that today and also again later on down the road. But as of this week, we have gone. We have the BCARES program that received another $2 million in funding just this week, and it ends on Friday. So we have a lot of programs that really are still available for individuals and business owners that really are going to be gone. So the BCARES program, Friday is your last day to apply. We'll look at that a little bit as far as EIDL. You got to know that EIDL's going away as of 12/31, the SBA Disaster Economic Injury Disaster Loan. So EIDL is going to be going away. Also, at the end of the month, we're going to lose Kern Recovers PPE, that wonderful program providing personal protection equipment to workers, to customers, to employees, to about anybody who needs it in your small business. So the PPE program is going to be going away, as is the City of Wasco program, I believe is still open. The City of Wasco program, that is a grant-related program. Look at it real quickly. And also Main Street Lending, the Main Street Lending program through actually the Federal Reserve is going to be gone as of this week, as of the end of this month. So we'll be talking also today to Erika Baltazar. Erika's going to talk about a lot going on in government contracting and procurement. We talk a lot about B2B and B2C, but nobody talks about what I call B2G, business to government. And there's a great sales opportunity out there for a lot of businesses and a lot of things happening in the desert that Erika will talk about today. And as usual, we'll be here for your questions and also today's poll. So let's get to today's poll. And this is one that we've asked the last couple of, I would say a couple of times during the last 39 weeks. And it is based on an NFIB, National Federation of Business poll that they take. And it is basically just, where do you think your sales are going to fall this year? Do you think your sales are going to be greater than 2019? Is it going to be 76% to 100%? Is it going to be half to 3/4 of what it was in 2019? Is it going to only be a quarter or 50%, quarter to a half of what it was? Or is it going to be dreadfully less than 25%? So jump in and give us your best guess right now on December 9th, where your sales are going to fall in. And, many of our businesses have been impacted. A lot of them have not. So greater than 2019, 3/4, a half to 3/4, a quarter to a half, or less than a quarter of last year. Okay, so we have about 62% of you have voted right now. What we're going to do is we're going to end this poll. So get in right now. Here's your last chance, and we'll share the results with you. And our final tally, 64%. And as you can see, 36% of you are about half to 3/4. And another 28% between 3/4 and the full sales that you had in 2019. Kind of 11% on the two fringes. You've had a better year than 2019, or you've actually only done between a quarter and a half, and regretfully 13% of you sales have dropped 75% or more. Okay, so thank you for sharing that information. That really kind of falls along the lines of the NFIB survey. And we have those results here. So yes, they're pretty similar. A little higher are less than 25%, and some of the other things. So this could be important when we start looking at a second PPP. So a second PPP, if the stimulus goes through, and there is a second PPP, would likely be to those that have suffered a hardship or have been in an industry that has suffered pretty devastating economic times, of which if you go to about 3/4% of your sales or less, it looks to be 60% of you. And those of you that have had your sales drop by half or more is almost a quarter. So thank you for sharing that information. Along our same line of PPP questions, we're going to ask this question again. We've asked this before, but just why don't you let us know the range? If you received a PPP, what is kind of the size range that you received it in? 50,000 or less, 50 to 150, 150 to 350, or greater than 350,000. So we have about half of you that have got in already. And this has kind of changed significantly as we've kind of gone through the term of a 39-week pandemic webinar. But we're going to share these results with you and show that the vast majority of you that are here today, as 60% of you have voted, the majority of you are 50,000 and less. So a lot of independent contractors, maybe some sole proprietors, and lower amounts of employees. Then the next group, just to the 50 to 150, 17%, 150 to 350, and 12% of you are over 350. So thank you for that. Kind of gives us a good direction when we get the PPP stuff of where maybe to focus when we have forms and things like that. And lastly, our last question, number 3. is your current status of your PPP. And let's launch this poll. What is your status? I have submitted my PPP forgiveness to my bank or third party. I have submitted and received SBA forgiveness approval. My bank is still not accepting applications. I plan to submit by 12/31, or I hope to submit by the end of the first quarter, and that should be 3/31/21. So there's my first glitch in writing 2021, and we're not even there yet. So a bunch of you are getting in, and so give you one more moment or two to get in, and then all of a sudden it's going to go away, and we're going to end this poll. So we have 60% of you voted, and we now are going to share the results. 37% of you still don't have, your bank is still not accepting applications, or you want to submit by 12/31/20 and hope to submit by the end of the first quarter 2021. So 17% of you are in and have actually submitted. And look at that. We have one of you who have submitted and received SBA approval. It's a beautiful thing, I'm sure. So great information. Thank you for sharing that with us. Get rid of these polls right now. And let's talk a little bit about some of the great work done by the Latino Task Force and some of the free COVID testing sites that we have. They were out yesterday, I believe in Lamont yesterday, but going today at the Vallarta Supermarket on Niles in Bakersfield. In Ridgecrest, I think this is our first COVID-19 free testing site for the Latino Task Force in Ridgecrest. So that's going to be going on today, or excuse me, tomorrow between 12:30 and 3. Friday in Lamont, and then back in Bakersfield on Saturday. And it's interesting when we go to the website and we start looking at a lot of the things that are out there. You know, we see what's happening and some of the great stuff that's already happening here in the county, and a lot of the free testing that's going on through the County of Kern's Health Services Agency. So this is a map, and it's a map online, and it's fairly up to date. Actually, it's totally up to date. And it shows you the sites that they have. Now, the blue sites are for testing for COVID-19, and the green sites are for free testing. And many of those still include that $25 gift card. For those of you that want good value and you want good health and a $25 gift card, there's still plenty of that going on. Some of these are open daily. So if you click onto some of these green stars, I won't do it today for the interest of time, but if you click on that, you'll see the free testing sites that are available. You'll see the dates and times that site will be open. So a lot of testing still going on, and we still need testing because of what we're seeing with the pandemic and a lot of things. If we look at the national picture on what's going on, you still see that map with showing a lot more red and a lot more despair. Getting back over to more locally, getting over to the state, and talking about what the state is doing. Of course, now we're in this San Joaquin Valley, Southern California. We're all in this, and also there's some counties in the Bay Area that are, I think, voluntarily actually doing it, but it's the stay-at-home order for 3 weeks. And people ask me a lot. They say, well, what's your opinion on the stay-at-home order? And businesses say, should I comply? And I tell them, I said, well, from what I've seen, there's not a lot of enforcement going on in that. I go, that's your call. It's a call, but the one thing you have to do is you have to make your customers and your employees safe. So if you start by making your employees and your customers safe and you protect your brand first and foremost, then it's your call to be open. And there's a lot of businesses, there's a lot of our clients that are continuing to be open. Now, in my opinion, the true test of all this is going to be not if you're open or not, it's how comfortable your customer feels coming to your business. And keeping your customer comfortable and keeping them safe in this environment. And I know there's a lot of things that normally happen right now. There's a lot of festive events a lot of holiday parties and such. And I know that we continue to miss out in 2020 on a lot of our things that we really take for granted for. We take them for granted, to be honest. And so the stay-at-home order is something that continues to go on. So if we look at the counties now in California and the rates, obviously we look at Kern and they have the stay-at-home order. They're not really doing much as far as giving us the data, but here's the data you can actually find and pull up. In the interest of time, we will move on. So that's a little bit that's going on the testing side of things and on the COVID side of things. As we mentioned, the Kern County PPE program is going to expire the end of this month. And there you see the number of businesses and the number of products that have been distributed. It's still out there and they're still providing great products in order to help keep your business as safe as possible. Go to the Kern Recovers website, download the form, and you just go through this process right there. And again, that is Kern County. If you just Google Kern Recovers PPE, you'll likely. So that's still available. As I mentioned, the City of Bakersfield BCARES Program is ending on Friday. And again, that is a grant based on the number of full-time employees you have, between 5 and 20,000. So take care of that if you haven't. Wasco, I love this picture. Wasco's the city of roses, and look at those beautiful almond blossoms. They have their program that I believe is still open. I haven't heard otherwise. So that's something that's available. And so there, number of programs that are still available, including EIDL. And remember, EIDL is still up and going through the end of this month. And you can get reconsiderations if you've been denied in the past, if you've been turned down. There's a process to go through to where you can get that hopefully up and going. And you can also get more money added to it if you need more EIDL funds, potentially up to the $150,000 limit. Okay, moving right along and getting back to our PowerPoint presentation. There's those sites there. We talked a little bit about stimulus last week, and this is what's been being kicked around. We've talked a little bit about stimulus, I know, the last 6 months. So this is still pretty much on the table. It's a lot of different, there seems to be 2 or 3 of these items that really have, it's the $160 billion for state, local, and tribal governments. And the very bottom, the short-term protection from COVID-related lawsuits, those seem to be the 2 that are really creating a lot of heartburn and keeping this from actually happening. Other than that, there seems to be a lot of support for a lot of the other items on here. So we have all that going on with stimulus, and let's give PPP some time here. So again, let's start with the timeline here. And the timeline is going to be 24 weeks to use the funds. That is if you elect a covered period of 24 weeks or by December 31st. So if you see over there, the little parentheses on the side, I think I have 8-7. That would, if you actually received your funding in August, which would be pretty late in the process, you would have until the end of December 31st to actually use your funds over the 24-week period. At the end of that 24-week period, you have a 10-month window in order to apply for forgiveness, which includes your lender taking, which does not include your lender looking at it for 60 days and getting it approved and kosher from their standpoint and uploaded to the SBA portal. And then the SBA has 90 days. So again, ignore what you see in the corner of the form. The form says it's expiring on the December 31st. The form might be expiring. The program has these timelines, this 10-week window period. Okay, 10 things to remember. And these are the 10 things I want you to remember. There are a lot of them are process items with a lot more detail that needs to go with them. And unfortunately, I think we need a whole hour on this, and that's what we'll probably end up doing either on a Wednesday or maybe another day down the road. So keep this in mind. that the program, the payroll protection program, the intent, and to keep the process as simple as possible. A lot of our questions come up, and a lot of our questions is, remember that the intent of this program by Congress was to actually provide relief for small businesses, but to keep their employees in force and intact. So when this ended, which was hopefully a lot sooner than it's going to be, that they would be ready to go back to work. So the intent was, and why we started off with a 75% figure, your funds had to be used 75%, which has been simplified down to 60. But still, remember the process. Remember the intent of this program was to keep your employees going. The other thing to remember is that we had major changes to this program on June 5th. June 5th was the PPP Flexibility Act, and it ushered in a lot of changes, including that 60% payroll figure and a number of other things, including the 24-week period of time that you can use to use your funds. So really, the 24-week period for your covered period was really one of the major changes and allowed a lot longer time frame. You have 24 weeks. You did not have to designate 20 weeks ago that you were going to use that money. You were going to use it for the PPP program. So there's a lot of flexibility that we have in using that. So a lot of people, originally we had an 8-week covered period, and then you were given the option for 24 weeks. I believe we've seen most people, about 2/3 of the individuals who have elected, and it's an election, to use the 24-week covered period. A lot of individuals that had businesses that weren't as devastated early on and were able to keep their employees going were able to use it during that 8-week period, and that is fine too. And you can use it over that 8-week period or the 24-week period. Just remember that there becomes consequences with your full-time equivalents or using one of the safe harbors that we'll talk about in just a minute. So again, everybody asks, what is the best? I have a lot of to use that 60%. What is the best to use my PPP funds for? Well, going back to number one, we're looking at the intent of the program, and that was to pay your people and to pay actually business owners for the time that they were going to lose in state mandated lockdowns and other problems associated with COVID-19. So do recall that it is now down to 60%, but many people have said, I can use the whole 100% now that we have 24 weeks for payroll. And, that just makes it a little simpler because you're going to be submitting documentation, and it's really kind of the intent of the program. Anything else, I think it makes it a lot easier and a lot cleaner. So we did have, as you see there, we have number 5. And number 5 is to manage your particular program, is manage your PPP, and you have that expense flexibility. And what we've done is, besides misspell managing this in this slide, what we've done is we had, for many of you that have been around for the summertime, and I know we have a lot of newer viewers in attendance, but for those that were around early, what we had was we had a lot of Excel spreadsheets and things like that. I'll bring that up. So we were really working to manage the program and really to get the full value out of that particular program. Just remember, you have a lot of expense flexibility of when you spend that money and that time. So one of the other keys is to select the appropriate forgiveness form. We had a number of you that were 50,000 and under. One of our previous webinars, we spent a considerable amount of time in the new 3508S form. We'll look at that form in a moment and look at the other forms after we get through this top 10 list and go through that and provide more detail. But do look at the forms. There's 3 variations of the forms that are now available. The S form, which really doesn't take FTEs into consideration, because if you have a PPP of 50,000 or less, you have been grandfathered in, you have been checked off on that requirement, and the full-time equivalent of maintaining the number of employees and the salary that you paid them is now not a consideration. So we'll look at that form and the others. The next thing to remember is to gather your documentation to support forgiveness. This is kind of like a tax audit, whereas you have an amount there, you're going to have to provide substantiation to support that number. So if you have $100,000 in payroll, maybe you go to your documentation, you go to your payroll reports, you go to your IRS 941 filings. Your state of California lists each individual employee on a quarterly basis. On your DE, what is that? DE3, DE4? I forget so easily, I guess. So, but anyway, your quarterly payroll forms are going to have that information, and you're going to be able to substantiate that documentation based on those forms that you have already filed with the government. Another key, I think, to remember is to work with your lender. And oftentimes lenders are using a third-party partner in order to facilitate the forgiveness process. But do that. Work with your lender. Your lender is really your friend in this process. They're going to be your friend if you go through a second round of this. And really, they are now getting pretty experienced since the SBA portal has been open since, I believe, August the 12th. And we're finding a lot of our local banks and credit unions in Bakersfield are already going through the forgiveness process, and I think our numbers are a little higher based on that. So then also the next thing to remember is going to be your certifications and the number of FTEs. The only one that requires a detailed FTE calculation is going to be on basically the long form. But also, it is important to note that you are basically pledging under perjury of law that what you're signing is correct. So, first of all, get your information correct and then be able to certify the results of that. A lot of these are going to be done on a basis of a signature and a certification. But if potentially you are audited down the road, then you're going to have some problems. Also, there is a number of resources that are there to help. We're going to be doing a lot more of this, and we have a consulting team that's going to be in place, and we're going to be offering the one-on-one assistance for questions. We're thinking about doing some additional chats and other things like that in order to help facilitate this process. So there's a lot of time still to get it done right, to get it done where you won't have any future replications. And also, there's plenty of resources that are going to be available to help you. So jumping back real quick and going back to the forms that we have, and we'd be going here. And then let's go up here to the first form, which is basically just the regular long form, which is a 5-page form. And none of the other ones, they start off the same way, but this gets into the individual wage limitations that you're going to have and that you're going to have to do. And there's a number of reasons why you can actually, if you cannot use a safe harbor, most of us are really thinking that safe harbor is going to be the way to go, especially with a second government shutdown for most of us, at least in our region. But individual employees, if you have to go this route, which I don't really see a lot of businesses, but there's going to be some that are going to have to go that route. More information and the more that you provide is going to be helpful. So one of the other forms that we have is going to be back to this one. And this is the EZ form. And the EZ form does not have the calculation either for that. It has just your expenditures and what you've used the money for. It has a lot of the certifications. Again, either you or your authorization are certifying. So please take this very seriously. I know you will. And the last form on all these is going to be a demographic form that the SBA is trying to collect demographic information to try to get you this money so quickly. and so fast that they didn't really get a lot of the early on demographic information in order to get this out. Lastly, our last form is going to be the S form, the PPPS form, and which stands, of course, for 3508 short. Very simple. Your authorization, you're saying, um, authorizing all these things. Second page is demographics. All you 50,000 and under, it's a fairly simple process for you now. So you between 50 and 150, you're saying, hey, will the stimulus have blanket? Will they have the same exclusion here for those 150 or less? We hope it does. We're going to have to wait and see, but we hope it does. Like I say, we're going to have in the coming weeks, we're going to be here every Wednesday. We're going to be here with additional programs. We're going to have a lot on this forgiveness. Those are the same things, the things you want to keep in mind right now. And it is time for me to move along. If you have questions, we're going to get to your questions later. Put them in the Q&A box. Other comments or other things you can put in the chat box. Questions, go to the question box. We'll try to hit your questions toward the end. And it's time to introduce our special guest today. And it brings me great pleasure to introduce Erika Baltazar. Erika is kind of a home-ground girl from Bakersfield, attended Taft College. She's currently a procurement specialist for the CSUB SBDC, where she's worked. She began as an independent, actually an associate consultant. She was honored by the School of Business in 2017 for her outstanding work. She's consulted over 200 businesses. She has had several successful outcomes with their business with those. Previously, she worked as a procurement guru with the California Retail Partners on the high-speed rail project. She worked for the city of Taft, where we found her, and received an AA from Taft College. And thank you, Taft College, for recommending her to us, the School of Business, David Lane there. And now she's a graduate of California State University, Bakersfield, and alumni of the BPA program. She's in an MBA program. Erika, thank you so much for joining us. Take it away.
Well, thank you, Kelly, for that warm introduction. So, like Kelly said, I'm Erika Baltazar, the procurement specialist with the Small Business Development Center. Prior, I worked on the high-speed rail, and I put together contracts, purchase orders, agreements, and then I sought, out small businesses to work with. And then I've been able to take that experience and now help small businesses in trying to obtain contracts with agencies. So it was great that I was in the buyer's position, so I can help small businesses on establishing relationships with buyers. So let's get into it. What is government contracting? So government contracting is the government purchases products and services ranging from toilet paper to construction and everything in between. So I put on here toilet paper because I know that during this year you have maybe have seen a decrease in sales within your business due to the pandemic. And I had a business owner in the restaurant industry actually see an opportunity in supplying toilet paper to the government. So there's contracts out there for toilet paper. And so they did see that opportunity and has taken it. So maybe now's the time to start exploring opportunity out there for you. There's 3 levels of government contracting. There's the federal, state, and local, and we'll be looking at each of those today. So the state of California spent $2.2 billion on small businesses in fiscal year 18-19. And I can only imagine that number is increasing. The government is still purchasing. The pandemic has not slowed the government down from purchasing. So there's a lot of opportunity there. Go to my next slide. So is your business ready? So things to consider before getting into government contracting. The first would be funding. Can you afford to sell to the government? Do you have access to capital along the way? So sometimes the payment terms will be a net 30, 60, or even 90. Or even if you're a subcontractor to a prime, you don't get paid until the prime gets paid. So it's really important when you look over these contracts to look at the payment terms and make sure that you're able to um, see what those are, and they will be okay for your business. Past performance, typically on federal contracts, they want to see you in business for at least 2 years. But still, if you're a startup, you can still obtain contracts through state and local agencies. So, does your business have a history of sales? Does your business have insurance or bonding if required? This is something you can look at in contracts, see what their insurance or bonding requirements are, and make sure that you're able to meet those needs. And then the market research. Have you researched the market to determine what agencies purchase your product or service? This is really important to identify who your buyer is. So I can help you with this. The SBDC, we're here to help. And so we can help you do this market research and see what agencies purchase your product or service. So we'll start off with local buyers. So locally, we have Kern County. You can register as a vendor on their website there, and you can see, local bids up. Also, the city of Bakersfield, you can go to Planet Bids. Every city has their different portal in Planet Bids, so you want to make sure it's through the city of Bakersfield. And then also with these contracts, when you go in there and you see a contract, and maybe you don't plan to bid on that specific contract, but you can get the buyer's information. So this is the buyer that you want to make contact with and start establishing that relationship with. So it's good to get their information and then introduce yourself to them. Send over your capability statement, which is a marketing tool used in government contracting. And that's something else I can help you with. Or you can also Google your city, county name, and then plus purchasing, and see and find out where you can register as a vendor with your local buyer. So to find your state buyer, you can go to the state of California and Cal eProcure, and then this is where you can register as a vendor. Some departments on there is like state hospitals, correction and rehabilitation, general services, and there's much, much more. So you can register right away. I actually had a business that I've been working with, and we've been looking at marketing strategies. And so it's an employment agency that specializes within medical staffing. And we were able to find contracts for medical staffing through Cal eProcure. So there is opportunity on there. You can look up past contracts that were awarded. You can see who the company was, who the purchaser was, what the dollar amount was. So there's a lot of great tools on this website that you can look up and research. And then with the state and local agencies, there's certifications that you're able to obtain to help in getting contracts. You don't have to be certified, but it can help. There is benefits to it. So they recognize the disabled veteran business enterprise, which is 10% or more service connected. There's a small business certification, less than 100 employees, with 15 million per year or less, and then the small business for the purpose of public works. So these are recognized on the state level, also local. When you look at these contracts, you'll see on there, and they'll ask if you have these certifications, if you are a small business. Even if you're a small business, you can't mark that you are, because you do have to be certified. You'll get a number, and that number is what you provide them with. So I can also walk you through the steps in getting certified. And then on the federal level, with the federal government, there's the beta.sam.gov website that you can go to and look up contracts. You can use your NAICS codes when you're looking these up and see what's out there. So locally, we have the Naval Air Weapons Station in China Lakes. So you're able to see contracts with them. And to give you an update with them, they are having a long-range acquisition forecast coming out on their website next week. So if you're interested in doing business with them, I would advise to go to their website next week, get the spreadsheet, look it over. It has where China Lake is planning to spend money, so you can get an idea of what their requirements are, contracting opportunities, the type of contracts. And so they'll be having that out again next week. Also, they are having possibly a construction-related virtual industry day event, which is for another earthquake recovery project. So it's not the one that was in Ridgecrest that they got funding for a few years ago. This is going to be a different project. And Kelly, I know that you've attended some of these events in the past. Do you want to let the viewers know about how the events are?
Well, on Industry Day is an annual event, and what it does is it really is about $1 billion that the Navy is going to spend in the next year, and it's kind of laid out. So it's kind of interesting from that standpoint. Is it's really a great opportunity for those that haven't really engaged and are able to meet prime contractors. So obviously with COVID, it's usually in early November. It wasn't held this year, but they're going to be coming out with that information, I believe, real soon, right, Erika?
Yes, yes. So they're working on that. So I'm sure if we find out any information, we'll make sure to let you guys know. So in order to do business with the federal government, you'll need to register with sam.gov. But prior to registering, you're going to need to identify your NAICS codes, which you can Google your product or service and then put in NAICS codes after, and it will pop up. You can have 1 to 10 different NAICS codes. You just want to make sure that you capture each one that identifies your product or service. Also, you want to obtain a DUNS number. You will go to Duns and Bradstreet website and you're able to register for that. And then once you have those two, you're able to move forward with registering with the System for Awards Management, sam.gov. And then at the end of completing your application, you want to make sure that you register for the small business profile. This is important because this is going to create a profile for you. It's similar to your capability statement. It's going to have your certifications, if you have any listed on there. It'll have, your NAICS codes, your business overview. And so I actually did have a business that is registered on here, and a federal government, it was a tree trimming business. They found them through their profile and reached out to them. The buyer reached out to them after they found them on here. I'm sure the buyer went to the dynamic small business search. They put in, what NAICS code they were looking for, which was related to tree trimming. And then they also probably put in that they needed a women-owned small business. And so my client's business popped up and they reached out to them, asked them if they were interested, and sent them over the contract. So you do want to make sure that you complete that at the end. And each of these registrations, certifications, they're all free for you. And I'm here to help you registering with them along the way. So on the federal level, the certifications that are recognized is the Hub Zone. There's a SBA 8A Business Development Program. There's the Women-Owned Small Business, the Economic Disadvantaged Women-Owned Small Business Certification. And then there's the Service Disabled Veteran and Veteran-Owned Small Business. So these are all recognized on the federal level. And again, I'm here to help you complete each of these if you are interested and eligible. So does your business need to be certified in order to do business with the government? It does not have to be, but there are benefits if you are certified. So a few of those is increases access to government contracting opportunities. So set aside or sole source contracts. Agencies have goals to do business with certified businesses. So like the high-speed rail, when I worked out there, we have goals to do business with small businesses, and they take that very seriously because if they do not reach those goals, they do get penalized. So they are looking to do business with small businesses. Certifications can give you a competitive advantage, and then you can become accessible to prime contractors needing to fulfill participation goal requirements. So there are benefits to getting certified. Again, it's all free to do. It just takes time. So to get started, get registered as a vendor with the entities you want to do business with. Again, it's really important to identify who your buyer is, who you want to do business with, who purchases your product or services, and then getting registered with them. Get a certificate, get certified if you're eligible. Do your research. This is really important. Get familiar with agency representatives who purchases what you sell. Building relationships is key in government contracting. So identifying those buyers, reaching out to them, letting them know who you are, what service and products you offer, and then seeing about how to start building on that relationship. So if you have any questions at all, here's my contact information. I'll be more than happy to go over this with you and answer any questions.
Great. Thank you, Erika. And we do have some questions that are coming in. If you have any questions on the procurement side or the PPP side, go to the Q&A box, get them in right now. And let's start with Mary. I was renewing my SAM yesterday, and the link I was directed to indicated a $500 fee to register, but I thought this was free.
That is correct. So it's probably a scam, or it's a third party that's telling you that if you give them all your information and pay them, they'll go into SAM and just put in your information. It is free. So maybe it's a different website it redirected you to. Make sure it is a .gov website. So it is free. They should not be charging you $500.
Okay, and the next question is, to get certified, what are the eligibility requirements?
Yeah, so the requirements would be to have 51% ownership of the business. Depending on what certification you want to obtain, they have their different criteria. So typically it's 51% ownership or more. You have to be located, the principal office here in California. And then you have to be the day-to-day decision maker in the company. You have to show that. If there is any licenses that the company has to have in order to operate, you must be the one that obtains those certification or those licenses. So those are some of the requirements.
Okay, great. Next question is, I have a construction company. Do you help with DBE certifications?
Yes, I do help with DBE certifications. Those are through Caltrans. A lot of construction companies will utilize DBE certification. So yes, that is something that I can help you with completing and getting all your backup documents together and sending that off to Caltrans. Yes.
How long does it take to register with SAM?
It can take up to 30 days because after you fill out your application, it's going to send you an email. And in that email is going to be a template letter you need to complete. You'll have to get it notarized and mail it into SAM. So once they get that notarized letter, they verify your account, then it will be active. So it can take up to 30 days.
Okay, the next question is, how can you determine what type of work China Lake is looking for?
Well, with the long range acquisition forecast, you can look on there and it will be listed on the type of work that they're going to be looking for. So I recommend to look on their website next week, and so you can get an idea of the type of work that they're looking for.
And I think it's going to vary a little bit from what they do normally with their weapons development, and compare that with what they're going to be talking about in the next few weeks with their earthquake repairs. But really, the prime contractors, they have a lot of prime contractors. And if you want to be a subcontractor to them, they're the ones who really get to know.
Yes.
Okay. Well, if you think of something else, bring that in. And in the meantime, we'll transition to a few of these PPP questions. And the first one on that is, I got a PPP loan on May 12th and used the 24-week covered period. Can I keep using PPP money till December 31st? And the answer is no. You can use it for 24 weeks or 168 days from May 12th. So going to the day that you received your funding, May 12th, that would carry you to about the end of October. So your covered period then would be from May 12th, 168 days moving forward to, plus or minus October 30th. So I hope that helps. There's another little wrinkle in that also, because you can actually have expenses that are either incurred or they're the actual expenses that happened within that 24-week period. So let's just say that your payroll period, let's say that you paid your employees on May the 12th, and it was for the 2-week period beforehand. Since you paid that during your covered period, you can't include that even though it's 2 weeks before. And at the end of it on October 30th or so, let's say that you had another payroll that goes 2 weeks, into the future. Or you have money that you incurred actually but hadn't paid yet. So it's paid or incurred on those two periods of time. And on the payroll aspect of it, you can slightly modify the covered period date for the beginning to work for you. So keep those two things into consideration as well. Okay, next question. Is there a drawback to using the 24-week period? Initially, we were going to go with the 8 weeks and didn't spend all the funds. Well, this is a prime example of why the 24-week period is there. Because a lot of people figured this might last for only a couple of weeks. And I mean, Major League Baseball did. They postponed games for 2 weeks back in March. So what we started to see was, as it started to appear to be much more serious and longer, it was difficult to spend the money in those 8 weeks, which added the flexibility component to it, the 24-week period. So there's not really more backup or administrative needs. You just need to be able to document if it is all employees and all payroll. Of course, it could be other things too. It could be mortgage insurance, it could be rent, it could be direct utilities and other expenditures. Really no working capital, but facility related and payroll. So it just might be easier just from a standpoint of using straight payroll like we kind of talked about earlier. Okay, John, if there's a second PPP, will borrowers be required to use the same lender as their first loan? Some banks have been less than helpful, and their second loan with a different bank would be preferred. It's a little too soon on that to call, and that's really, I would think that it probably would be up to the borrower to use which lender they wanted to use. I wouldn't think that they would be fixed to the first one, and I know that there's been a lot of grumbling about some of the major banks about some of the process at first of getting a PPP loan, and then also now the fact that it's taking a long time to get them forgiven or even just to get their portals open. So I can see some parties maybe wanting to go to a different bank. I don't think it'll be an issue. I don't think they'll get that much in the details, but we'll have to wait and see. Do you know if SBA is extending the assistance in paying SBA loans past 6 months or providing anything similar? And that reference is to the fact that if you had an existing SBA loan, an SBA 7A loan, an SBA 504 loan, SBA was going to actually make your payments for you for 6 months. Thank you very much, SBA. We have not seen anything different on that. We haven't seen anything come back to say they're looking at doing re-upping for another 6 months. There really wasn't much buzz on that on the stimulus talk that was happening during the summer. So if we're coming down to another skinny stimulus, I doubt if we're going to see something like that. But anything's possible, and that's the thing about stimulus. And plus, it might not be in this package right now, but President-elect Biden has mentioned that one of his first things is to do another stimulus. So if he does another stimulus, maybe it'll be far more inclusive and include many more items that really are beyond what we're talking about today. So my guess would be to stay tuned on that. I have not heard anything. Okay. Do you know if the county is still providing PPE supplies? I was on a meeting earlier today, and what I heard on that was that they still are and plan on doing it through 12/31. There's no indication on their website that the program is ended. So I believe it is in place for as long as, the CARES Act money that they can spend. And remember, that came from the first federal stimulus, all the CARES Act, a lot of the other local grants that you see. So I would go to the Kern Recovers website, download the form, and submit it. I believe the PPE supplies are still available. What application do I use for a smaller independent contractor PPP? Use the S form. It's very, very simple. And generally for someone like yourself, it would be only for your salary, only for your benefit for your salary. Um, so I would do that. That would be it. What is an FTE? Well, an FTE is a wonderful thing called a full-time equivalent. And a full-time equivalent employee is one that kind of came out of all of this and became a major acronym through the PPP, Payroll Protection Program. And basically, it was the earlier statutes that required businesses and borrowers of the PPP to maintain their levels of employment, their levels of employee, and to not cut their wages by any more than 25%. So in those businesses that might need to go in and show that they have retained their employment to get full forgiveness, that is where the FTE requirement comes in. Since then, we've received 2 safe harbors, and one of them is rather inclusive for a lot of businesses, and has to do is if their business has been affected or shut down because of COVID-19 restrictions that were imposed on them, excuse me. So that is a little bit about the wonderful FTE. When I do my taxes, do I include PPP funds as income and expenses? And right now, I can only tell you about right now, because that's the beautiful thing of these programs. Right now, what you see that right now it's considered non-taxable, but the expenses are not deductible. So this is opening up a whole new can of worms, and we're going to be talking about this next week. If I go back to my PowerPoint presentation and I go to our program for next week, you'll see that we have Lou Barbich and Patrick Hoffman, CPAs, with us next week to talk about this in much greater detail. And so in getting back to other questions that were related to the tax aspect, have you heard if Congress is working on making the expenses associated with PPP deductible? So having just gone through the fact that it's not taxable, but the expenses are not deductible, is opening up a whole can of worms, because most of the loans are not going to be forgiven. The IRS has came out with indications about what's going to happen. There's just a lot of things on the tax side of things. There was a lot of early buzz about this PPP being a multiple benefit for small businesses. And that would have included actually having the PPP income, the PPP loan amount, non-taxable to you, but allowed you to deduct the expenditures. Congress came out and said, or many members of Congress came out and said, that was the intent originally of the program. The Treasury Secretary had a different interpretation. So right now, your guess is as good as mine on what's going to happen. I don't suspect anything, again, to happen in the skinny stimulus because it seems to be rather focused, but it's something that could be addressed farther on down the road. With a new administration, this kind of looks like about $120 billion tax cut for small business. I don't know if it's going to be in there. But right now, where we stand, and hopefully we'll have more updated information for next Wednesday when we really dive into the tax situation and many of the tax consequences and the difficulty of tax planning, so much stuff, which will be mid-December. We'll know more hopefully by then next Wednesday. Let's see if there's any more questions here. Have you heard anybody who has received California Rebuilding Fund loans yet? And the California Rebuilding Fund program, I've heard it's gone up to $250 million. Robin, I haven't heard of anybody specifically. I do know that our guest speaker, Eddie Palomar, discussed that in detail last week about what was going on with the process. I encourage you to go online and to do the application form if you're interested in it. Again, that is not a forgivable loan. It is a loan that needs to be paid back. And so with that comes, the whole debt structure of paying back that loan. It seems to be very, very, very popular early on. There's also talk that we talked about last week about the state of California through their Office of Small Business Advocate having a program to where there would be a small grant program up to about $25,000. I believe the total aggregate of the program is about a $500 million state of California program that they're hoping to kick off after the first of the year. So stay tuned, as I like to say. We'll be back with more information on both of those. But you can go to the California Rebuilding Fund website and do a pre-authorization and go through it and actually find out if you're approved and what lenders might work with you on that. If someone is interested in starting a small business, is this the right time to start? Erika, would you like to answer that question? See, I caught her off guard there. Pretty good, huh?
I would say yes. Now could be the perfect time to start your small business, depending on what it is, what opportunity you see out there. But yeah.
And I agree with you, Erika, and I think we're seeing a lot of traction. And the sad thing is when a business closes, that storefront doesn't close with it or that location oftentimes, and it's available to be rented out afterwards for others. So we're starting to see a lot of opportunity, and plus there are opportunities that are out there that are completely different than normally that we see in a non-COVID environment. So I think it depends on the situation. Lenders are taking a real serious approach to having a plan on getting through COVID. So if you're looking at bringing in some borrowed money, there could be issues there, but sure, why not? Okay, that looks like to be our questions for today. So thank you everyone for joining us. We'll be back next Wednesday for number 40. Special taxes, a lot of good information coming up next week. Thank you, Erika Baltazar, for joining us today. It was great having that great insight on everything going on and everything that's happening in that government procurement. It's funny, businesses might slow down their buying during a pandemic, but I don't think the government does.
Nope, they don't.
So there's great opportunity. So thank you, everyone. We'll be back next week. For Erika, I'm Kelly. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye now.
Bye.